Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda, and today I wanted to share with you my most surprising reads of the year. I have 7 books to share with you, and what I realized when I was picking the books I wanted to talk about for this video is that I haven't given a single book a 5-star rating this year. So all of these books are 4-star ratings, and to me, for a good reason. So the first book I wanted to chat about was An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I read this book, I think back in February, so it's been a while and the details are going to be fuzzy for me. But basically we follow, I think her name's Isabel, isn't it? Yes, Isabel, who has a craft, and she is really good at painting, and what she does is paints portraits of the fair folk. But she makes a very grievous mistake one day in painting human emotion in the prince of the, is he fall court? Autumn court? Anyway, so this is not good because one thing that the fair folk don't do is show human emotion. So obviously he's not super happy about this, and she gets whisked away to the land of fairy to basically atone for her sin of what she did. And the story goes from there. I really enjoyed this book. I liked having basically only 2 main characters that we follow, and watching their relationship shape and form itself throughout the story. I thought the plot was interesting. I haven't honestly read a lot of fae books, so for me this was new and intriguing, and I got to learn a little bit more about the world of the fae. I liked the main character a lot, and she just had a very strong family sense to her, which always speaks to me because my family and I are very strong and have a really good relationship. And I just remember really liking the world and imagery that the author paints within this book. She resides in like either the court or the world or whatever, I don't remember the terminology, of summer. So it's essentially always summer for her. And she starts to go through the different seasons as she's traveling with the fairy prince to speak for what she did. So I thought that was really neat and interesting, and this book left me wanting more from it. I felt like it ended at a good spot. I don't feel like it needed to continue on, but I just thought about it as after the book ended. So I thought it was a really good read for the springtime. The next book I have is The Law of Dreams by Peter Burns, and this I read in March during the Irish Readathon. And it takes place in Ireland during the Great Hunger of 1847, and we follow a main character named Fergus, who journeys from County Clare to America. And along the way, we watch him grow up a lot. He has, I think 2 sisters, maybe 2 siblings. Anyway, he watches his whole family pass away during the Great Hunger, and he almost does as well, but he manages to live through it. And it follows along his way as he meets his 3 passionate loves. So you've got Phoebe, Luke, and Molly, and they're just very vivid characters and all kind of teach him something different along the way. And this is based on the author's family history as well. So I just thought it was a really interesting story. It did have a bit of animal cruelty, which was a little off-putting for me because that's not something I enjoy. I mean, I don't think anyone enjoys reading about it, but it's really something that can color my perception of a story. But for this being an actual historical setting, it made sense to have it in there for what it was, just because, I mean, that it's real life. So I really just enjoyed this story a lot, and I think it's interesting because it's not really a time period we read or hear a lot about in school. So just kind of learning more about that I find interesting, and uh, I'm glad that I did end up picking up this book. The next book I have is a book I also picked up during the Irish Readathon, and that is Trinity by Leon Uris. And this takes place in Ireland in, I want to say, pretty close to the same time. But this takes place in Northern Ireland, and it starts out in May of 1885. And I believe it's as Northern Ireland is trying to become a separate country from the Republic of Ireland. So we follow, oh gosh, I don't remember the names at this point, but I think we follow two best friends and kind of their story as they grow up from pretty young boys into adulthood, and it just kind of what it's like to live through the revolution and things like that. So this was another really good book. It was a little intimidating because it was a bit of a chunker, and it's a mass market paperback, so it's got tiny writing, but I listened to this on audiobook and I really enjoyed the read, so I am glad that I finally picked this one up as well. The next book I have, I think I picked up during April, and that is Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen. I had read a book by Sarah Gruen in 2018, which I hated. It was At the Water's Edge, and I thought it was just such a poorly written book. And then I heard about her kind of little scandal with the Hatchimals and how she was buying them up and then reselling them for like a super ridiculous price in order to afford I think probably attorney or like the legal fees for a person who was convicted of murder that she didn't believe was convicted of murder. Anyway, so I'm very off put by the author herself, but I picked this up at a local used bookstore before I knew that about her, and it supports my local used bookstore, not the author herself. So I finally got around to reading this book, and I had previously watched the movie, but I hadn't watched it for quite some time, so I didn't remember like the details and things within it. But basically we follow Jacob during the 1920s, right? Or 1930s. I don't remember what the time period is. But Jacob is going to school to be a veterinarian, and he's sitting his final exams when he gets pulled out of class and is told that his parents have both passed away in a car accident. And as he's going over their will, he finds out that his parents owe a lot of money and they're super in debt. And all this time he had thought that his parents were doing really well. I think it is during the 20s because I'm pretty sure it's during the Great Depression and it hits them as well. And his father's clients were giving them things like chickens for payment or eggs for payment or flour or what have you versus cash. So they were getting by, but obviously they didn't have enough assets to settle their debts when they passed away. So he is basically at a loss for what to do. He doesn't know how he can, like, he's grieving, obviously. He can't go back and finish his exams. So one night he jumps on a train, and it just so happens to be a circus train. And he gets a spot as the vet of the circus and falls in love with this lady named Marlena, who is married to the guy who is in charge of all the animals and stuff, and he's really not a good guy. And so it's kind of the story of from him joining the circus and kind of growing up and learning about the real world to kind of the downfall of the circus and what happens after that. And I thought the setting was just so vivid. Jacob is the narrator of the story, and it's Jacob as he is an elderly gentleman living in a home, waiting for his family to show up and take him to the circus, which he hasn't seen in quite some time. So it's kind of him reliving that experience. And it's very heartbreaking, very sad, but also just told really well. And I did really enjoy this book. The next book I have was an audiobook that I do own on Audible, and it's The Huntress by Kate Quinn. This is the sequel to the Alice Network that she wrote the previous year. And we follow, we don't follow any of the same characters from the Alice Network, though one does pop in. And it's kind of the story after World War II of these people investigating this woman who killed one of the main character's brothers, and also did some not great things during World War II. So it's them keeping the search alive to find this woman and actually bring her to justice, and how the woman has kind of hidden herself away and brought some innocent people in. So I didn't like it as much as I like the Alice Network, but I did really enjoy this story as well. And basically it's made Kate Quinn an auto-buy author for me. I haven't looked into any of her backlist stuff, but I really love her stories that kind of surround World War II, because I feel like she tells such unique stories. Like the Alice Network is a story obviously about the Alice Network, which is this network of women spies that took place during the First World War, which I really didn't know a lot about until I had read this book. So I feel like she does a lot of really good research, and within that brings these amazing like historical stories to life for us. So I really enjoyed The Huntress, and I can't wait to see if she brings out more books in this series or what she has next. And the next book I have is My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Fredrik Backman. And I have absolutely fallen in love with Fredrik Backman's writing. I really like that he follows some crotchety old characters, though in this one we're really following the granddaughter of a crotchety old character. Her name is Elsa, and she's around the age of 7. She is 7 years old. And it's a story about her coming to terms with the person she loves the most in the whole entire world, losing her life to cancer. But her grandmother has left her these tasks of apologizing to these people within their lives after she passes away. And Elsa doesn't really understand like why she's been tasked with this and why her grandmother feels the need to apologize now that she's no longer living. And it kind of opens up a whole new world to Elsa, and explains things that Elsa kind of thought were a fantasy but turn out to maybe be true. And I just love this story so much. I love that I read A Man Called Uva, and Britt Marie was here last year, and Britt Marie is in this story again, and it's just so nice to have the stories overlap and get more in depth about the characters and just the relationships and things like that. I love this book so much. It was so funny, and Elsa is a big Harry Potter fan, so there was a lot of that in here, and it was just very heartwarming book that also had a lot of funny bits. And the last book I want to talk about is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, and I have had this book on my shelf for probably at least 10 years. And I picked it up at my local used bookstore that I love so much because I fell in love with this cover. And the back is about like lost books, and I was just like, I love books, this cover is gorgeous, I'll read this like really soon. And then I kept putting it off and kept putting it off. And I finally told myself, like, you need to stop this, you need to read this book already or get rid of it. And I finally listened to it on audiobook, and fell head over heels into this story, and I loved it so much. This takes place in Barcelona in 1945, and we follow a young-ish boy. He's kind of like a teenager at this point, named Daniel. And his father is an antique bookseller and introduces him, or shows him, he finally takes him to this library that has lost books in it. And Daniel is told that he can pick one book. And the one book he picks, he has to guard with his life, essentially. So he picks up a book called The Shadow of the Wind by Julian Carax, and he reads this book and absolutely loves it, and is really intrigued by the author because it's not someone he's ever heard of before. So he starts to research this author a lot more and try and find out more about him. And it's kind of a story of then Daniel researching Julian's life and figuring out why he can't find out more about him, and it opens up just this whole world of mystery around this author and a past that someone is really trying to bury. And I just enjoyed this so much. It was such a good book, and I'm so glad that I finally picked it up. So those are the 7 books that I kind of had a feeling I was gonna like. I mean, they were on my bookshelf to begin with, so there was something that was drawing me to them. But also a lot of books that I have had for a while and was kind of at the point of, I either need to read this or I need to unhaul it. And I'm really glad that I ended up reading them this year because they turned out to be the most surprising books that I've read. And I'm really grateful for that. So I would love to know if you've read any of these books, and if so, if you have similar thoughts to me, or if you didn't like them. I'd really like to know why. And I would also love to know what some of your most surprising reads for 2019 were. So if you feel so inclined, please do let me know down in the comments below, and I will chat with you there until my next video. Bye!